ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into Part 5 of the series What If Quirkless Deku gets the ability to copy all the quirks. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Izuku was currently watching the news and Himiko was sitting on a beanbag scrolling through her phone. Izuku has made up a sum of money of the last couple of months and managed to buy both of them some sweet new items. Phones were the big one. Izuku didn't exactly know how to make one, so they didn't have one, which made things incredibly difficult. But now that problem was solved. Himiko seemed oddly fascinated with fashion trends and comedy things on YouTube. The second thing was internet. Izuku had been using the library's internet to get schoolwork done so he wouldn't be left behind and teach Himiko while he was at it. Izuku also found out that she was incredibly far behind, but it did make sense. She did run away at age. Izuku and Himiko were both doing their own thing, but Izuku did notice something off about Himiko. He picked up quite a few of her Ks on what was going on. She was a very expressive person and loud too. You would always know what she was thinking, if she was sad, angry, happy, or bored. You'd always know if she was bored. But right now, she was spacing out. Himiko only does that when she was thinking. She had an incredibly hard time figuring things out. Izuku turned away from the TV to look at her better. "Hey, Himi," Izuku said, catching her attention. Instantly, Himiko piped up and hummed and looked over to Izuku. All of her life returning instantly. She looked at Izuku expectantly. "What were you thinking about?" he asked. Himiko then zoned out again, looking up to the roof, trying to collect her train of thought. Izuku waited patiently for Himiko to answer. She then looked down at Izuku. "Are we a couple, Izukuin?" Himiko asked. At this question, Izuku became a bright tomato. His mouth hung open. He tried to speak, but the words died on his mouth. The question was sudden, which surprised Izuku. It's not like he hadn't thought about it. Himiko is someone he has liked for a while. Izuku gulped and pulled the front of his shirt outwards. He had to calm his nerves before he spoke again. "Well, do you want to be?" Izuku asked. He was nervous even though he knows he shouldn't. She asked the question about it. It would be preposterous if she had said no. He wouldn't be surprised though. Everyone has been against him his entire life. But what he wasn't expecting was for Himiko to squeal. Izuku's eyes shot over to her only to catch a blur of something lunge at him. A sudden weight slammed into Izuku, and he felt hands wrap around him. Izuku hit the floor and felt Himiko squeeze him tight. "Yay, we're a couple now," Himiko yelled. Izuku chuckled at her antics and embraced her back. But then something unexpected happened. Himiko gave Izuku a quick kiss on the lips. His eyes widened, and he was stunned still. Himiko didn't realize this and sat up again, looking at Izuku. "Can we go to the movies?" she asked excitedly. Izuku was still stunned, but managed to find the ability to speak. "Yeah," Izuku answered. Himiko squealed and stood up and started hopping around. She then raced over to her bag, which had all of her clothes. Izuku was still stunned and confused, but he didn't mind. This was a good development. Himiko walked through the streets mindfully. She isn't in broad daylight that often, especially considering her murderous past. When she is in broad daylight, she is always with Izuku. This is the first time that Izuku isn't with her. It does upset her, but he was currently talking with Dabi and Aizawa. It's been about a month since they were officially dating, but according to Nomi and Akito, they always were. Butterflies still flutter all over her stomach when they mention how her and Izuku are a cute couple. But today she was out with someone else, much to her dismay. Katsuki Bakugo was leaning against the wall of the huge shopping center complex. She had gotten his number, although begrudgingly, and he had texted her to meet him here without Izuku. She is still furious at him and the rest of his gang. She doesn't understand how Izuku forgave him, but it most certainly doesn't mean that she has too. Himiko really wants to shove him off a cliff. With her arms crossed, she walked over to Katsuki with a scowl. He saw her coming, but didn't say anything. He just waited for her to arrive. Himiko stormed over with a cross expression. "What do you want, Bakugo?" she asked angrily. He sighed. "It's Izuku's birthday next week," he responded. Himiko's eyes widened. She didn't know that. Did her not tell her? Knowing Izuku, He probably thinks it wasn't important to say. Looking at your expression, I can tell you didn't know. So he's what I'm asking. I don't know what to get him as he probably isn't as hero crazy as he once was, so I'd like your help. If you want to get him something, I'll pay for it, as long as it isn't too expensive. You don't want to be around me, so let's make this quick, Katsuki stated. Agreed. Himiko responded after slight hesitation. Katsuki nodded his head and turned away. Himiko followed silently while glaring into the back of his head. The two walked around the shop silently for the most part. Katsuki was the only one to make conversation about asking what Izuku would like. After looking around, they found a booth with people trying to give free trails on support items course. Himiko told Katsuki that would be something Izuku would love, which he agreed. He got one of them before walking off. Himiko still needed to find something for Izuku, and after walking past a certain store she knew what he would have wanted. Katsuki was confused as she told her to follow him in. Are you sure he'd want this? Katsuki asked. Himiko rolled her eyes and glared at him. The store they were in was a customizable hero memorabilia, meaning if you wanted a figurine of a hero done a certain way, they'd do it. But they also have done vigilantes. Stain, Nightcrawler, and particularly Popstep. Katsuki smiled when they gave the workers the money. The price was quite hefty, but his gift was free, so he thought it wouldn't be too bad if he put a bit of money into this. It was for Izuku after all. Himiko would have to come back after a week to pick it up, but she was fine with that. She set a reminder on her phone to make sure she wouldn't forget because knowing herself, she would. They were close to the exit of the shopping center, and Himiko couldn't wait to get away from Katsuki. Throughout their entire time together, Himiko has been fighting off the urge to punch Katsuki. Katsuki! A voice shouted. Himiko froze. She has only heard that voice once, but she committed it to memory. Both her and Katsuki turned around, and Himiko felt her urge to kill ball up once more. There walking towards them was Katsumi and Izumi. Katsumi looked furious while Izumi seemed jealous. Himiko's hands clenched as she looked at the two. Katsumi stormed up to Katsuki, who wore a weak frown on his face. She then pointed angrily at Himiko. Who the F is that Katsuki? She said angrily. Himiko looked at Izumi, who seemed to be glaring at her. She snarled as she looked over to Katsumi. None of your business, Beach, she said angrily. Both girls were caught off guard at the anger at which Himiko said to them, but Katsumi became infuriated. Who do you think you're talking to? She rebutted. Katsumi took a step in her direction, but was stopped by Katsuki pulling on her arm. Calm down. Let's go, Toga, Katsuki responded. Katsumi growled and ripped her arm out of her brother's grip. She turned around and glared at him and pointed at Himiko again. Don't tell me you're dating that skank? She asked angrily. Himiko started to shake and her eye started twitching. If this goes any further, she may just pounce on them. I'm helping her get a preset for her boyfriend PP. Had no go do what you two were doing, Katsuki responded, trying to walk away, but an invisible force stopped him. He turned his head around and glared at Izumi, who was undoubtedly the person behind it. She was looking at Katsuki angrily. Why have you stopped hanging out with us, Kachin? You're choosing to hang out with people like them instead of us. What happened? She asked. He growled and looked away. I'm trying to change now, let me go, Katsuki responded. Apparently Katsumi didn't like that answer and gripped his arm. Katsuki growled and felt his arm starting to burn. Katsumi was using her quirk too much, but the pain was definitely there. No, you are coming with us and stopping this horse SHD you're pulling. You're the main reason why Izuku ran away, so stop acting like it was our fault, Katsumi hissed. The mention of Izuku seemed to have triggered Himiko. She lost all patience she was holding on to and rushed at Katsumi. She gripped her stomach and flipped her over in a suplex. The entire shopping center was stunned at the display at what just happened. They weren't really paying attention to the loud teens, but certainly the act of one of them suplexing the other did. Katsumi was hurt on the ground, and Izumi quickly went over to help her. Himiko was about to lunge herself at Izumi next, but Katsuki caught her. He then started to forcefully drag her away. Let me go, Himiko hissed, elbowing Katsuki in the ribs in hopes that he would let her go. Katsuki growled but kept his grip firm. No, if the police get involved, what do you think would happen? Izuku might get found, and I don't think you're an angel, so stop struggling and come on, Katsuki responded. She hissed but relented. As much as she hated it, he was right. If the police got involved, she would be arrested and they might find Izuku. Himiko didn't want that, so she let herself be dragged away. But mark her words, If she sees those two again, she is going to smash their faces into a wall. Dabi sat outside of Aizawa's apartment. They just got back from talking with Izuku. Aizawa had to get Izuku to give 2 quirks back from girls he took them from. He knows that they probably deserved it, but they are young and no crimes are against their names. Izuku agreed, and they found the 2 girls and gave them back. He didn't know what quirks they were, but didn't really care. Currently, Dabi was smoking some weed. Aizawa doesn't like the fact that he does, but isn't intending on stopping him. Aizawa wants him to go into some reform program to help him, but he isn't so sure. Dabi has been put in an improvement program before, and his experience wasn't exactly great, so he's skeptical. Sighing, Dabi finished what he was smoking and went back inside. He has a lot to think about currently, but for now he is going to tease Eraser. Walking inside, he finds Aizawa in his sleeping bag drinking coffee. "You getting ready for Miss Joke?" Dabi asked with a smile. Aizawa groaned as his response, making Dabi laugh. "You know you like having her over," Dabi smiled. "I'd very much love to be put into a coma every time she is around," Aizawa said in a tired voice. At that, a knock came at the door, making Dabi smile devilishly. "Welp, I'll give you 2 lovebirds some space," Dabi said before walking away. "I hate you," Aizawa said, making Dabi laugh. Izuku and Himiko were fast asleep on the bean bag together underneath a blanket. Himiko was hugging tightly to Izuku, who was uncomfortable but dealt with it as he liked being close to Himiko. He was still new to the whole dating thing, but enjoyed every second of it. Being official with Himiko while also being a vigilante duo was awesome. It is a shame he had to give back 2 of his quirks. Energy Spear wasn't a big loss. It was a powerful, but Izuku never really used it. Constellation, however, was upsetting as it was a powerful barrier quirk that worked well with Izuku because of all of his freckles. But he was fine with it. They were still children, and it did seem like they learned a lesson while being quirkless. But the past couple of months, however, have been great. His max quirk output is now 12, and he has gotten several more quirks. Izuku still has his quirks Bolt, Heavy Skeleton, Fat Inflammation, Pitch, Tentacles, Horn, and Retardant, which only gives 7 quirks to his max. He now also has Strong Impact and Tooth Missile, a strength quirk, and another that combines well with Heavy Skeleton. But he has also retrieved 4 more quirks. Unfortunately, his last one is unusable, which is called Stasis, allowing him to completely freeze for 2 seconds and negate any damage he otherwise would take. But he would train until he got to use it. But he still has another 3 he can use. Well, technically 5, but he combined them to have 3 instead of 5. His first new quirk is Rock Manipulation, which allows him to control rocks like comets. It destroys the area of where he rips the rocks out of the ground, so it isn't a quirk he would use often. His next quirk is a combination of 2, Sonic Scream and Bouncy Bullet. Sonic Scream allows them to shout out a burst of loud sound strong enough to push others away if they are too close. The second one emits a weak laser from the user's mouth that bounces around on flat objects until it hits something that isn't flat. Combining the quirks turned it into Echo, making it so that the user emits a scream that bounces around on flat surfaces until it hits something that isn't flat. The next one Izuku loves. The first quirk is called Scan. He has 5 digital pads on his fingertips that are connected by a dim limelight. If he touches a person or an object, any answer he has will be answered. The quirk becomes inactive for 5 minutes, and Izuku can only have 1 question answered on an object every 24 hours. The quirk he combined it with was called Possession, which allows Izuku to control any object he wishes that he can see. When he combined his quirks, they became hacked. Unfortunately, the quirk became Contact instead of whatever Izuku sees, but he can deal with. He can control whatever object he wants for any PRD of time and have any answer he has for the object answered. The quirk also works on people, but it only stuns them for a second before the possession wears off. Izuku and Himiko were still peacefully asleep. Well, one was, but Izuku didn't mind. He put up with it. But expectantly, Izuku woke. He groaned and held his head. Something loud interrupted his sleep. Izuku looked over to Himiko, who was fortunately still asleep. For a criminal who has been on the run for almost 5 years, she is a heavy sleeper. The noise persisted and Izuku tried to figure out what it was. After a few seconds, Izuku realized it was knocking. He groaned again and forced himself to get up. It took a minute because of how tightly Himiko was clinging on to him and the fact that his arm was dead. Izuku managed to stand and tiredly trudged over to the door. Opening it, Izuku saw that Katsuki was on the other side. Also that the sky was pitch black, meaning it was either really late or really early. Took you a fing while, Katsuki said with his signature scowl. Izuku sheepishly rubs the back of his head. He looks back into the caravan and looks at Himiko, who is still sleeping peacefully. He looks back to Katsuki. Well, Himiko likes to leech onto you, Izuku said. This made Katsuki cough, then laugh, giving Izuku his smirk. Look at you, ladies' man, he snarked. Izuku smiled and looked down. But then he furrowed his brow and looked back up at Katsuki. What are doing here? It's still dead at night, Izuku asked. Katsuki sighed and rolled his eyes. It's your birthday, moron. I got you something, Katsuki said. Izuku's eyes widened. He did remember it was his birthday, but thought little of it. He hadn't gotten a gift since Tuya died, other than Mitsuki getting him some katsudon after the day. Izuku watched as Katsuki reached into his pocket and grabbed out a small ticket or pamphlet of sorts. Katsuki raised it up towards Izuku, who cautiously grabbed it, still shocked that he was getting something. Izuku looked at it. It was a pamphlet that was about tinkering and making support items. He looked at Katsuki with wide eyes. It's a free trial that I signed you up for. I know it's SHD, but I paid for what Toga got you. I would have come in a better part of the day, but albeit your sister's birthday, Katsuki said. Izuku scowled at the mention of his sister, but then paused. Wait, Himiko knew my birthday? Izuku asked. Nah, I told her, and helped her get a gift. You'll get it later today or something. I would chat more, but I gotta get home before the hag gets up for work, Katsuki said, shoving his hands back into his pockets. Izuku looked at him while he looked down. Tears were brimming from at his eyes before Izuku lunged at him and hugged him. Thank you, Kachin. Thank you, Izuku said, hugging Katsuki tight. Katsuki was shocked, especially at the name Kachin. Izuku hadn't called him that yet since he forgave him, but now he finally had. Katsuki smiled and hugged him back. He wished he could go back in time and right the wrong he had done against Izuku. He wishes he can go back and slap the SHD out of his younger self, but it's too late now. All he could do was try and fix the wrongs in the present. He won't F up this time. Izuku-in. Izuku-in, wake up. Himiko yelled, trying to shake Izuku up. Izuku gasped at the sudden force of being shook and looked at Himiko, who was smiling widely. Happy birthday, Izuku. Himiko yelled loudly, smiling from ear to ear. Izuku smiled and hid the tears of happiness welling up behind his eyes. Morning, Himi. Thank you, Izuku smiled. Himiko squealed, then jumped away. Wait here. I need to get you something, Himiko said as she bounced away and bent down into a drawer. Izuku's eyes widened when he remembered that Katsuki had told him about helping Himiko get him a gift. Izuku watched Himiko bounce back to him with a box in her hands. I got you something, she said excitedly. Izuku matched her enthusiasm. The present she was giving him was wrapped. Although Katsuki gave him his present first, being the first present he had gotten in years. But Himiko's was wrapped, making it seem more like an actual present. And it was from Himiko, making Izuku's heart squeeze. She handed the box to Izuku, who took it carefully, not wanting to destroy it. Open it, she said happily. Izuku smiled and wiped his eyes to hide the tears that were threatening to spill. Carefully, he unwrapped the wrapping paper, wanting to savor the moment. Once he had removed the wrapping, a small white box was what was left. Slowly, he opened the box that looked very well crafted, telling Izuku that whatever inside was special. Slowly, he removed the lid and his eyes widened. It was an action figurine, like some of what his sister had. But this one was a custom-made. You can always tell that it isn't something that can be store-bought by the pose and craftsmanship. But what made this so obviously a custom figurine was that it was of him. Hope. The tears that Izuku was trying desperately to keep him suddenly rocketed out. Izuku wailed and grabbed Himiko and pulled his face into her stomach and cried. Himiko hugged him tight as he cried. She pet his head as Izuku cried. Thank you, Himi. Thank you, he said through sobs. Izuku and Himiko had started watching movies together, Himiko cuddling into Izuku's chest. Izuku had his vigilante figurine close to him. He loved it, and it made Himiko happy. But to their surprise, another knock was sounded at the door. Sighing, Izuku got up to see who it was. He knew it wasn't Katsuki as he would be with his sister. It was probably Dabi. He opened the door, but was surprised on who was on the other side. Dabi was indeed there, but so was two other people. Eraserhead and Miss Joke. He didn't get to ask why they were there as Joke yelled. We brought cake for the birthday boy, she yelled. Izuku was shocked. Why were they here? Dabi chuckled and walked forward, ruffling his hair. You need cake for your birthday snow cone. Now let's celebrate, Dabi said. Himiko came up to them and gave Miss Joke a hug. Despite only knowing her for a short while, they immediately bonded. The group all ate cake and laughed. Well, except Eraserhead, but he gave Izuku some cash before crashing in his sleeping bag. But Izuku was happy. The happiest he has felt in years. He feels loved, having his new girlfriend by his side. An older brother figure with him, a fun auntie, and a grumpy uncle. He couldn't be happier. Izuku and Himiko went out on patrol that night. It was oddly quiet that night, however. Izuku and Himiko had yet to find any crime except for a few drunk people causing a ruckus, but nothing of concern. This did concern Izuku. Why isn't there anything? Izuku asked, stopping on a roof. Himiko paused as well, being faster and ahead of him still even after all of his quirks and months of patrolling. She is just too goddamn fast. Isn't that a good thing? No villains on the street. It's like they know it is your birthday. Himiko said happily. Izuku frowned as he looked around. Something fell off, and whatever it was, he didn't like it. Crime doesn't disappear. Something is happening and I don't like it, Izuku said. He felt the hairs on stand up. He suddenly felt fear. Something was happening and whatever it was scaring him. Instinctively, he made himself bigger with his iron bones. He allowed electricity to run around him. He made his horns larger as well as his teeth and nails, making them into claws. Are you okay? Himiko asked. Before Izuku could answer, however, he was punched. Izuku yelled as large arms gripped him tight, preventing him from moving. He knew something was off, but why did he feel an immense amount of fear? I have caught you, villains. Surrender peacefully, or I will take you down forcefully. A voice boomed. That's why. Izuku moved his head up to look at the monster holding him. It was his father, All Might. He wasn't smiling, but glaring down at Himiko. Himiko stared daggers at All Might. If looks could kill, he would have wished he was never born. Let him go, you oaf. She screamed. Himiko ran at All Might, cutting her arm. BLD sprayed out, and she instantly turned it into fire. All Might yelled quickly but then snapped his fingers. The fire was quickly blown out. All Might then grabbed Himiko. He picked her up by the face and then slammed her onto the ground. The ceiling of the roof cracking at the force. Izuku could only stare in shock. Himiko was crushed into the ground, and all he could do was watch. The father, who neglected him and gave his bully of a sister everything she wanted, just hurt his girlfriend. Now all he could see was red. How dare you? Izuku yelled. He grew even more, pushing his heavy skeleton quirk to its limits. He reeled his arm back and slammed the back of it into All Might's face. He activated Strong Impact, using one of its 10 uses. All Might yelled as he flew back. He was knocked off of the roof and slammed into the ground. Izuku quickly went over to Himiko, who was standing back up with hatred on her face. Himiko, I need you to run, Izuku said quickly. Himiko looked at him perplexed. And let you fight him alone? No way, Himiko responded. He shook his head. No, we can't win against him. We need to run away. I can get away with Bolt, but I need you to go. Please, Himi. I can't lose you, Izuku said, almost desperately. Himiko looked at his pleading eyes before sighing. She nodded her head, although reluctantly. She turned around and hopped off the roof. Izuku sighed, but he was filled with nothing but rage. He got up and turned around. He turned around to the edge of the roof, where he knocked All Might off. However, the #1 hero had already got up. Izuku didn't have time to process as the 7-foot-tall man jumped up and punched him right in the face. Izuku was flung into the air and flew for quite the distance. He saw All Might chasing after him, flying over to Izuku to punch him into the ground. However, Izuku turned into a bolt of electricity and zoomed into the ground to avoid All Might. A few seconds after, All Might landed on the ground. Izuku turned around and matches All Might's glare. I'm going to ask you once, villain. Where's Izuku? All Might asked. Izuku felt rage boil in his BLD. He felt his bones shift as his size altered. His bones stretched to the outside of his body, making Izuku grow. It looks like he is in a mecha suit. Izuku is in immense amount of pain as his body strains as he reaches the limits of his quirk, but he couldn't care less. He has made himself as large as All Might, and he wanted his father to feel pain. Why does it matter to you? The world may not know what kind of monster you are, but I do, Izuku snarled. All Might frowned. He got into a stance and looked ready to attack. Izuku did the same. "I gave you a chance, villain," All Might said in a threatening voice. Izuku scoffed as he stared him down. All Might then lunged forward, reeling a punch. Izuku reeled back a punch of his own. He activated strong impact, and their fist collided. An air wave burst from their fists, making the glass of the buildings around them shatter. Izuku was about to punch him again, but All Might was faster. The force of his punch dented the iron of Izuku's chest, and the force pushed him back 20 feet. His feet dragged across the ground, ruining the road, but he stayed standing. Izuku reformed the dent in his iron with his quirk, then glared at All Might. "I can only match him with strength when I use strong impact. I only have 8 uses of that quirk left, so I have to be careful how I use them. He is a lot faster and can probably punch me before I can even react. I need to try something else," Izuku thought. Electricity swirled around Izuku once more. All Might charged at him again, but Izuku turned into electricity. Izuku then re-emerged as he and All Might passed. He extended out his claw for a hand and swiped All Might's ribs. He heard All Might yell in pain as he ran past. Izuku smiled in triumph. He looked behind him to see his father clutching his side as BLD pours down. A helicopter was watching their fight. The news was prepared for this when they saw All Might out running along and was waiting for a fight. They were broadcasting this to the entire nation on the news for the Japanese families. The Yagis, Bakugos, and Todorokis were all next to each other on the couch as they watched the fight. They were all celebrating Izumi's birthday, when suddenly Toshinori got up and left. They left a slice of cake for Izuku. Now they were watching the news as All Might. The #1 hero fought the vigilante Hope, who possessed multiple quirks. The successor of All for One. Here we have our symbol of peace fighting the elusive vigilante Hope. But where is his partner in crime, Carmilla? The news reporter said. Izumi watched with her friends as her father fought the successor of his arch-nemesis. Shouldn't Izuku be the one fighting them? The successor for One for All to defeat All for One. She looks down sadly at the memory of her brother. He should be with them right now, but because of her, he might never come home. But she wouldn't give up. She looked back up at the television with determination. "Come on, Dad," she whispered. Katsuki was standing up with his arms crossed, trying to hide his worry. He knew what quirks Izuku had, and even with all of them, he couldn't match the sheer power All Might had. He was the only one in this room that knew that Hope was Izuku and had All for One. He hoped he will be all right. Izuku yelled as he was hit by a barrage of punches by All Might. He was launched back and slammed into a wall. His iron bones were cracked and bent in ways they shouldn't be. He was in so much pain, but he refused to give up. He activated fat inflammation, and his body glowed gold. The very next second, he was completely healed. However, his 7-foot-tall armor of iron had gone down as he couldn't hold it. Izuku saw All Might coming towards them again and screamed. A ball of sound bounced around the walls of the buildings. Izuku then fired his iron teeth as missiles at All Might. All Might was surprised, but was about to jump up into the air and avoid it, but Izuku stopped him by forming 2 tentacles from underneath All Might and holding him there. All Might yelled in pain as iron teeth missiles exploded on him, then was launched into the air when Izuku's scream hit him. Izuku turned into electricity to catch up to his father. When All Might was about to hit the ground, Izuku untransformed himself and increased the size of his arm. He then activated strong impact, and All Might slammed into the ground. Izuku was sure he knocked him out, but a fist punched him in the face. Izuku was then launched high into the air. All Might groaned. His body was bloody and he was running out of time. But he was determined to take Hope down. He squatted, then jumped into the air after Izuku. Izuku was in a delirious state after being hit in the face incredibly hard. So much that he didn't register All Might coming up next to him. All Might put his hands together and lifted his fists above his head. He then slammed them down, sending Izuku flying to the ground in light speed. Izuku hit the ground hard. His body was broken and he was bleeding everywhere. All he could feel was pain. He activated fat inflammation to heal him. It worked and he was fine, but he was tired. The last bit of energy he had left was healing himself so he wouldn't die. He felt small and vulnerable as a loud thug sounded next to him. A hand grabbed his face and squeezed it tight, making Izuku yell into the palm. "Surrender, villain. You have lost," All Might said. Izuku couldn't see, but he wanted to kill him. But he couldn't move. He was too weak, too tired to anything. He could only lay limply in All Might's hand as he could do nothing else. And it looks like our symbol of peace is victorious again. The news reporter yelled. The Yagis, Todorokis, and Bakugos cheered All Might, minus Katsuki and Mitsuki. Katsuki's eyes were wide as he became worried for his friend, only for something unexpected to happen. Let go of him. A voice yelled. It sounded like All Might, the loudness of how it boomed across the city. All Might looked to the side only to be met with himself flying at him. He was punched in the face and flew away, slamming into a wall. The new All Might then bent down and picked Izuku up in their arms. They then turned around and jumped away, getting as far away as they could before the other. All Might got back up. The Yagis, Todorokis, and Bakugos could only look at the television in shock at what just happened. Katsuki was shocked too, but then secretly smirked when he understood what just happened. What was that? The news reporter said. Izuku groaned as he got up. His stomach was hungry and he was really thirsty. As soon as he got up, Himiko rushed up to him and gently laid him back down. No, you're still injured. Lay back down, she ordered. Izuku didn't bother arguing as he just did what she told him to. Ugh, what happened? He asked. Well, All Might arrived on our patrol and you told me to run away. You fought him but lost, but not after spilling his BLD everywhere. I drank some of it and turned into him and punched him away and took you home, Himiko said. She then held up a vial of BLD. I also got some of his BLD for just-in-case purposes, Himiko said mischievously, winking at him. Izuku laughed, but then started coughing. Himiko quickly got up and grabbed him a glass of water. Izuku took it with a thank you and started to drink it. They're going to have to stop patrolling for a while until he can go out again. I wonder if I put All Might in a hospital. Dabi walked down the street to a place he hasn't been to in a long time. He's nervous on the inside, but he's managed to conceal it on the outside. It's a skill that he's had to learn. Something that's now incorporated into his personality now. He's forgotten how to act himself, but it isn't entirely a bad thing. He might not have survived the street if he isn't who he is now. Dabi had his hands in his pockets as he walked. It feels surreal to him, walking out in daylight. He isn't even hiding his face, which is having him receive looks from onlookers. But right now he didn't care. His steps felt a bit lighter than normal as he approached a house he hasn't seen in a very long time. Dabi stood at the front for a while, building up the courage to finally walk down. With his appearance, he probably looks like a creep, but he could care less about what other people think of him. Dabi, faking courage, finally walked towards the door. He took a breath and raised his and knocked on the door. He hid behind his facade of cool and uncaring, but inside his body was screaming at him. His nerves were bubbling, and he was worried. Dabi waited patiently for the door to open. His breath hitched when he heard footsteps approaching the door. Holding his tongue, Dabi watched as the door opened, revealing a woman behind it. She was slim and young, early 20s. She had gray ears with mostly gray hair, having red triangles mixed into parts of it. She had thick black glasses, and she was dressed in a comfortable floral patterned sweater with an apron. She gasped when she saw Dabi, which he expected. He is pretty horrifying to look at. The woman stumbled back at the sight of him, her hand gripping hard on the door, and then used it as a shield from him, poking her head out to look at him. I'm not as scary as I look, Dabi said in a tired voice. He sighed and brought hand through his hair and took a deep breath. He wasn't about to look weak, no matter how nervous he feels. The woman nodded shakily, but still looked uncertain. Dabi didn't blame her. Removing herself from the door, but not quite, she looked Dabi in the eyes. Well, can I help you? The woman asked with a slight stutter. Dabi sighed as he looked up and around the house. So many memories here, but almost all are bad. He tries to quell the fear inside of him to look snark and scary on the outside, or brave in this situation. Don't know. Just looking around to see how things are going. I used to live here, you know, Dabi said. This was his hint to the woman, or better known to him, his sister Fuyumi. After getting some information from both Miss Joke and Eraserhead on Endeavor's and Ice Queen's schedule, which is why he is at their residence now. Fuyumi and hopefully Natsuo should be the only ones home as Shoto and Zayato are doing their villain reform program thingy. Fuyumi looks at him oddly. Concern leaks into her expression as she looks over him. Her hands grip the door firmly as she peers over him. Sorry, sir, but this house was built for my parents. We have been the only residences here, so I believe you are mistaken, Fuyumi replies. Dabi turns to Fuyumi and gives her an, Are you kidding me? Look, Dabi sighs and brings his face over his face, composing himself. Dabi looks around the house again. Nope, I've got the right place. 10 years ago was the last time I was here, I think. Dabi says, putting his hands on his hips and looking around like he doesn't know what's going on. But to his dismay and disappointment, Fuyumi shook her head. She started to close the door a bit more, irritating Dabi slightly. Sorry, sir, but that's impossible. I've lived in this house all my life. You've never lived here, she answered, shutting the door a little but more. Dabi groaned in defeat. He thought his sister was smarter than this. Maybe it was the fact that everyone believes he committed suicide? He did do it in the middle of the house. Seriously, Yumi? Does this help? Dabi said angrily. He raised his right hand, and a burst of bright blue flames emitted from it. Fuyumi's eyes widened, and she stumbled back in surprise. Her eyes showed both horror, surprise, hope, and unbelievability. She put a hand to her mouth and stepped back, shaking her head from side to side, refusing to believe what Dabi had just told her. No, she said, still in completely shock and befuddlement. I watched him die, Fuyumi said, tears starting to roll down her cheek. Dabi sighed and put his hands down into his pockets. I know it is hard to believe, but if you need proof, ask one of our parents. I was interrogated about a week ago about Izuku Yagi, Dabi said. In a moment of bravery, but on the inside desperation. Dabi gave the best smile he could and stretched out his arms in a gesture of wanting a hug. I'm sorry I left, especially like that. But I never forgot, he said softly. Fuyumi stared at him. She still had her hand over her mouth, but it was quivering. Her entire body looked like it would topple over any second. Tears had rolled down her face, and a sob cracked out from her. She then ran to Dabi, wrapping her hands around him, and cried. Dabi embraced her and held her tight, patting her head. I missed you, Dabi heard her say through muffled sobs. If Dabi could cry, he would be bawling right now, but he burned his tear ducts of a long time ago. He sighed and hugged her tighter. I missed you too, Yumi, and I am very sorry, Dabi said weakly as he tried not to cough out the unused tears that he can't produce. Eventually Dabi was taken inside, and he sat with Fuyumi at the kitchen table. He got a glass of water to have, and the two started to talk, catching up with each other. So have you become a teacher? You finished uni last year, right? Dabi asked, taking a sip of his water. Fuyumi smiled at him as she fiddled with her fingers. Yeah, I'm a kindergarten teacher now, and I love it, Fuyumi answered. She sighed and put a strand of hair behind her ear. You have been doing illegal things, haven't you? Fuyumi asked. Dabi frowns, but nods his head. Nothing to get me more than a year. I mainly do abuse things and info broking. Information and stuff, Dabi answers, swirling the water in his glass. Fuyumi sighs and crosses her arms over each other, putting her elbows on the table. What happened to you? Why didn't you come home? And she pauses for a second, collecting herself. How are you alive? She asked. Dabi doesn't say anything for a while, seemingly in thought as he came up with an answer. Dabi then groaned, stretching in his chair, but not facing Fuyumi when he sat back normally. I'm not really alive, am I? Dabi laughs hollowly. He outstretched his arms, showing more of his burned skin to Fuyumi. I look like a corpse that wasn't cremated properly, Dabi jokes, shaking his head. For why I never came home, Dabi said, before looking up at the ceiling. Fuyumi can see the pained expression on his face. There are multiple reasons for why I didn't come back, Dabi said. He waits for a while, the air becoming tense. Fuyumi watches Dabi, or Tuya's face. He is neutral for the most part, but his eyes narrow for a few seconds. She watched one time as his face scrunched up in bile and disgust. I was scared. Scared of Enji, scared of Rei. I was scared of how I looked and what you and Natsuo would have thought of me. I was angry and I wanted an escape. Spiteful and just hatred of the 4 out the 6 people who live here, Dabi said with mixed emotions. Fuyumi noted the fact he called their mom and dad by their actual names. How are you alive? Fuyumi asked again. Dabi just shrugs and takes another sip of his water. He sighs as he puts it down before leaning back into his chair, putting an arm over the back across it. Honestly, I don't really know myself. It may be because of the fact I'm unnaturally cold. Hence why my quirk gave me freezer burns instead of regular ones. All I remember is waking up with blue fire all around me and becoming terrified of the punishment I'd receive. I climbed out of a window and ran. The next thing I know, I'm in an alleyway in incredible pain, Dabi answers. Fuyumi nods sadly. She knows that her brother went through horrible torture both physically and mentally. This is all insane to take in. A brother she was so sure she watched commit suicide a decade ago. But here he is, looking completely different and no longer acting like the same timid yet determined brother she loved. But she knows this is him. Hey, didn't you say that you were interrogated about Izuku, right? Fuyumi asked. Dabi nods his head. Well, do you know anything? Everyone is worried about him, Fuyumi says. Dabi frowns at that and grunts. The kid's fine. Better than he ever has been actually, and that is all I am going to say, Dabi says in a low voice. Fuyumi nods and accepts his answer. Tuya has always been close with Izuku. In fact, she is pretty sure that Tuya actively searched him out after his Quirkless diagnosis. Where are you now then? Fuyumi asks. I'm living in the house of an underground hero. His name is Eraserhead, and he's the main man on the job for Izuku. He is trying to convince to go to all these reform programs, but I don't know. The last time I did a program didn't end well, Dabi said nonchalantly. Fuyumi wasn't sure what he meant by program, but what she gathered from his sentence, it seems like this Eraserhead guy is trying to get him into being a hero. Tuya has always wanted to be a hero. Dad always told him he would being his successor and eventually become the #1 hero. He was told all of this, but he then told he was weak, pathetic, a failure. Fuyumi isn't sure how much of her original Tuya is still in there, but looking at him now, she believes he is still the soft bear he always has been. I can't control what you do with your life. But if doing this program gets me my brother back, then please try, Fuyumi says, not quite pleadingly, but in a sad tone of voice. Dabi looks at her shocked slightly, then looks down and sighs. Fuyumi smiles at that. He's thinking about it. Here, Yumi, do you know where? Who is that? A male voice said. Dabi instantly knew who it was. He didn't turn around to meet them, deciding to finish his cup of water. Fuyumi turned to her brother Natsuo, who was glaring at the shifty-looking man. She nervously looked at Dabi, who looked back at her. He winked at her and smiled devilishly. She cursed him under her breath before smiling sheepishly over to her brother. Well, Nat, this may sound crazy, but this is Tuya, she says nervously. Natsuo looks taken aback. He takes a closer look at Dabi and shakes his head. Dabi can feel his stare and raise his hand and gives a small wave above his head without turning around. Hey, Nat, he said before finishing his water. Natsuo snarls and looks over to Fuyumi. He raises his hand and jars it in Dabi's direction. Don't tell me you believe this SHD, Fuyumi. We literally watched Tuya die, Natsuo answers with anger. Fuyumi wasn't sure how to respond. She looked over to Dabi pleadingly. Dabi finishes water and sighs. He stands up and turns around to face Natsuo. Natsuo gasps and looks at Dabi in shock after seeing the scar on his lower jaw. I know about the secret door at the back through the bushes that you like to take to look at the stars to help with nightmares. You sleep with a teddy named Mr. Paddington. You thought girls had peas until you were almost 7. Dabi answers the last one with a smirk. Fuyumi scoffs and suppresses a chuckle by covering her mouth with her hand. Natsuo stares at him wide eyes before pouting and glaring at him again. Well, how do I know she didn't just tell you all of that? Natsuo accuses. Dabi drops his smirk and sighs. He looks to the ceiling diagonally and rubs the back of his head with his hand. He seems to be questioning whether or not he should say. Dabi dropped his head and put his hands in his pockets. The night before I disappeared, I went out through the secret door. Natsuo eyes widened once he heard that. I came out to you, watching the stars. I went over to you and sat down. We talked for a bit, before I broke. I cried into you, Natsuo, asking why I existed, why I couldn't be seen worthy enough as their son. Why I couldn't have possessed Shoto's or Zayato's quirk instead of mine, Dabi answered. Natsuo just stared at them with wide eyes. Dabi looked at him with a monotone expression the entire time. Natsuo looked to Fuyumi, who looked at the two, shocked. Natsuo looked back to Dabi, who was looking down and sad. He then smiled sadly and raised his arms in a gesture for a hug. I'm sorry I left, Nat, but I promise I never forgot. I came to as many of your soccer matches as I could, Dabi said. Wait, really? Natsuo asked. Dabi smiled, earnestly. You won the national championships and got man of the match in 2015, Dabi smiled. Natsuo nodded his head. A tear rolled down his cheek. He then tackled his brother in a hug, which made Dabi laugh as he was shoved back into the table. Fuyumi got up and joined the hug too. The three cried minus Dabi together as they were reunited after a decade. Dabi, Natsuo and Fuyumi hung around the dining table and talked for ages. They laughed and told each other about their lives, catching up with all of their missed times. The three all completely missed the turning of a key and walking of footsteps. A voice all shocked them. "Who the hell is that?" Zayato said, pointing at Dabi. Dabi was facing away from them, but his eyes immediately twitched. Fuyumi and Natsuo's eyes widened as they turned to the kitchen door. Their parents had their eyes wide in shock as they looked at Dabi, while the twins glared at the man. Dabi looked over to the clock on the wall and internally cursed. He wasn't supposed to be for that long. He lost track of time. "Well, looks like I overstayed my welcome," Dabi said, standing up from the table. He hugged both Natsuo and Fuyumi. "Sorry for the intrusion," Dabi says with a forced smile as he turns around to look at the four in the doorway. The twins glare at him while Inji looks down at the floor. His mother, however, is looking at him disbelief and sadness. The first time Dabi has ever seen his mother not look horrified at him. She takes a step forward, and the forced smile Dabi had was instantly removed as he now tried to not snap at her. "Tuya, is it really you?" she asks. She reaches out a hand, but all the composure that Dabi tries to keep washes away once she got too close. His face contorts into fury as he slaps her hand away. "It's Dabi to you," he seethes. Rei takes a step back and grabs her hand. The twins instantly rush up. Zayato going to her mother, who is now crying, and Shoto is now in front of her with anger on his face. "The hell is wrong with you?" "The police will be on their way," Shoto says sternly. Dabi twitches at the sight of him, but manages to smile threateningly. "Cool. I'll also give the evidence on who you removed 3 of Izuku's toes," he said creepily. Shoto's eyes widen, and so do Zayato's, looking up from her mother and looking at her twin and Dabi. Dabi laughs as he storms past them. He was expecting his father to block him, but he simply moved to the side and let Dabi pass. Dabi ignored it, however, and left the room by lifting the middle finger over his head. He walked to the door and opened before slamming it shut. Dabi groaned as he stomped away, wiping his face with both of his hands before shoving them into his pockets aggressively. Dabi was beyond sad, seeing those four completely dissipated any composure he had. But he couldn't deny, seeing Fuyumi and Natsuo again put his heart at ease. Izuku was still in bed. Himiko is forcing him to rest, no leaving the house and letting her take care of him. Izuku was kind of worried about it. It's not that he didn't trust Himiko, the exact opposite. But she extremely childish and a bit of an airhead. But to his surprise, she was very good at taking care of him and making him feel good. He shouldn't really have been surprised. Himiko survived on the street for 4 years. She knows how to take care of someone. It had been 3 days since his fight with All Might. His injuries still ache, and he finds it hard to stand. But he knows that his father is having a worse time if the injuries he saw from the TV any indication. He is also trying to gain a bit more fat. It's hard for him because of his extremely hard metabolism, but it allows him to survive fatal attacks like when All Might smashed him into the ground. So it is worth it. Currently, him and Himiko were on the beanbag eating katsudon. Himiko has no clue on how to cook, so she ordered it. Izuku was confused on how, but apparently, she just had them deliver it to the side of a street. Sneakily, she retrieved it and returned home for them to eat. Right now, the duo are watching comedy shows. Izuku does find it funny, but he mainly watches it because of the laughter Himiko cackles at almost every joke. It warms his heart. Unfortunately, a knock came at the door. Himiko sighed, but stood up and opened it. She smiled when she saw that it wasn't Katsuki like she thought. "Hi, Eraserhead." Himiko yells happily, bouncing on the heels of her feet. Izuku paused the show and looked over to the door. Why would Eraserhead be here alone? He'd only do it if he had something important to say. Eraserhead gives a lazy wave and looks past Himiko. "Is Izuku awake?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm up, Eraser," Izuku said from the beanbag. He nodded his head and looked at Himiko. "Is he doing all right?" he asked, and Himiko nodded. "Still recovering, but he's A-okay," Himiko said happily. Eraserhead nodded. "Great, but I have to take you somewhere for a meeting. Since Izuku's injured, I'll have to drive you there," Eraserhead stated. Himiko blinked and tilted her head to the side. "Why would we need to go somewhere?" Himiko asked skeptically. Eraserhead sighed and moved his finger in a come closer motion. Himiko did it, bending forward, and Eraserhead whispered something in her ear. Whatever it was, seemed to brighten her up. She started bouncing up and down and quickly ran to Izuku, picking him up bridal style. Let's go? She yelled excitedly. Izuku became a blushing mess and Himiko bounced out of the caravan with him in her arms. Wait, where are we going? Izuku stuttered, incredibly flustered. You'll see, Eraserhead responded in a monotone voice. Neither of the two gave Izuku any answers. They both hopped into Eraserhead's old car. When Himiko questioned about it, he answered that he rarely had anywhere he needed to go that was far away. If it was, he could jump across the roofs pretty easily. Izuku still just sat there awkwardly as they drove to their destination. Izuku was extremely confused and slightly scared. But then he saw it. The signature logo and building. The large glass building shaped in the letter H. Izuku's eyes sparkled in excitement as they pulled up to the front gate. The logo of UA at the top. Izuku's smile rivaled the sun in that moment. UA, I'm really here. It's so amazing in person. Wait, why are we here? Izuku suddenly questioned. Eraserhead ignored him and got out of the car. Carry him and follow me, will you? He asked Himiko. He nodded her head excitedly and quickly dragged Izuku out of the car. Himiko skipped along with Izuku in her arms. Izuku was blushing madly. But he tried to put his mind elsewhere like, why were they here, and why is this building so big, and why do they have so many rooms? Why the doors so large but the desks inside so tiny? It doesn't make sense if they were to have a big student but tiny desks. Then Eraserhead walked up to a door. He stood there for about a second, which confused Izuku for a moment before the door suddenly swung open. Izuku's eyes widened at it. He wanted to question, but for some reason, he had the feeling his question would be answered in a moment. Himiko followed Eraserhead inside, and Izuku was shocked at what he saw. In the center of the room, sitting at a desk, was someone Izuku never thought he'd see. A small white animal sat in a chair. There was a small scar over their left eye, and the species of them was unidentifiable. It looks like a bear, dog, and rat all at once. Izuku knew who that was immediately, Principal Nizu, the smartest being in the world. Hello, Izuku and Toga. Please have a seat. Nizu smiled innocently at them. Himiko flinched at the mention of her name, but she took a deep breath and smiled, continuing on. She walked over to the two chairs that were obviously left out for them. She sat Izuku down, then sat down herself. Well, hello. I must say that fight you had with All Might was spectacular, Nizu remarked, pouring a cup of tea. Thanks, Izuku said awkwardly. Nizu then held out the teapot in his hand to them. Tea? He asked. Both Himiko and Izuku politely denied. Nizu nodded his head, yet still smiled innocently. He then looked back over the two, putting his paws together gently. Well, I bet you both are intrigued to why you are here, Nizu rhetorically asked. Despite that, Izuku and Himiko both nodded their heads. Well, Izuku, I'm intrigued with you. First of all, with your quirk. While both dangerous and powerful, can be used for great purposes. It obviously will have to be monitored, but I think we can keep that a secret from the Hero Commission, Nizu smiled. It was the same innocent, unnerving smile he has given this entire time, and Izuku would be lying if he didn't say he was frightened by it. Himiko seemed blissfully unaware. I also have seen your passion to help others. I mean, not anybody can make a serial killer turn over a new leaf, Nizu said, gesturing over to Himiko. This made Himiko freeze, her eyes widen and shake slightly in fear. Izuku also did the same, but luckily Eraserhead came to the rescue. You won't be punished. We understand that your quirk contorted your thoughts. Others won't understand though, so your file will be wiped, and you'll be starting from scratch, Eraserhead said. Izuku sighed in relief while Himiko shakily nodded her head. Izuku reached over and grabbed her hand and gave it a reaffirming squeeze. Izuku took a deep breath before turning to Izuku and smiling. Sorry to be rude, Nizu, but I'm missing the point on why we are here, Izuku asked. Nizu chuckled, leaning back in your chair. Well, for a 14-year-old, you are quite intelligent, Izuku. Your old school brought you down because of your quirklessness status, but looking at your tests, you should have gone up several grades, perhaps even graduating by now, Nizu answered. Izuku only raised an eyebrow in response. Thank you, but I still don't understand, Izuku answered. Nizu chuckled with his sinister, innocent laughter. It made Izuku nervous as Nizu leaned forward with his eyes. I want you to teach the next generation of hero hopefuls with Himiko here as your assistant. Huh. So, this was the end of part 5 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.